Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Deb Stabita, a member of the Parish Committee. Welcome, all of you, either online or here in person in this beautiful sanctuary on this beautiful day.
We don't realize it started.
It started, yes. The little bell is missing, or whatever we call it. Anyway, once again, welcome. If we have any special guests here today, a very special welcome to you all. Our mission is to build community, search for meaning, deepen our spirituality, and make a better world. And also reach this mic. I realize I'm on my toes. To learn more about First Parish, please visit our website, walianuu.org, or contact Kate Holland, Director of Lifespan Education and Engagement. Or you can reach out to any one of us on the Parish Committee or Reverend Stephanie May. A big thanks to all our service participants today. Their names are in the order of service. For any of you who are here today, please remain masked. Those of us who are unmasked have tested negative this morning. Let's see, so we are going to greet our neighbors here. And everyone say hello to each other, yes? I mean, you probably already have. And anyway, and let the service begin, or is it let the games begin, or the service begin, or something? Okay.
Good morning. My My name is Alyssa Lee. I'm the Ministerial Intern here at First Parish, and my pronouns are she or they. We begin with opening words today from Minister Elizabeth Mount. It's a reading titled Co-Regulation. From our very first breath, we reach out. Co-regulation, not self-regulation, is in our nature. We find our cues from the sun and the moon, from each parent and caregiver. We find our place in this great turning planet by turning to one another, generation to generation. We awaken to the dawn and fall asleep at the evening's end. Our life's journey is part of something greater, something simple, something divine. A flame cannot be lit without a spark. A life cannot begin without the air, and we cannot begin to find ourselves without love. May we reach out to one another. May we offer love and nurturing care. May we join together in celebration of the interdependence of our lives. In this spirit, let us worship together. Quick note, we're having a little bit of an issue with our camera that normally points to the choir loft, so unfortunately we'll not be able to show the choir on Zoom today. So you'll get a nice view of the chalice whenever they're singing. I'd like to call up the King family, which is my family, to light our chalice today.
With open minds and loving hearts, we gather to search for meaning, to care for one another, and to work together for a better world.
Great job. Our opening hymn today is going to be hymn 1007, titled There's a River Flowing in My Soul. Please join us. Please rise as you are able.
Good morning. My name is Kate Holland. I am the Director of Education and Engagement here at First Parish, and my pronouns are she, her. This morning's Time for All Ages comes from the Reverend Erica Hewitt. Think of a place where you are safe and at peace. What is the signal that tells you that you are safe and at peace? For people in the United States military, there's a special signal that says to them, "You are okay and can be at peace." It is a melody called taps, and it is 24 notes long. It was written during the Civil War by a general and his bugler. It's hard to remember how important the sound of a bugle was to the military once upon a time. Before there were radios, the sound of the bugle could communicate to troops over a large area. In 1860, the end of the day was important. It was time, if there was time and peace enough to play taps, that was a signal to the troops that it was relatively safe, that they didn't have to worry about battle, that there were no soldiers of the opposite side to worry about. To a camp of soldiers, the notes of taps meant, unless you were on duty, that you could close your eyes and sleep in peace. They say the first time that taps was played for a fallen soldier's memorial was during the Civil War. In those days, the traditional military salute at a memorial service was the 3-round volley of rifles. It's still today the sign that they use. But this one time, the battle had been long and hard. They called a ceasefire so that both sides could collect their dead and to bury them. On one side of the camp, as they had finished their work of burying them, and the memorial service started to come together, they realized that if they fired the shots of salute, the other side might take it for a start of the war again. They had the idea to blow the bugle. It was a sound that wouldn't be taken as aggression. Taps came to mean the same thing. It meant the safe and quiet end of the day, a time to rest, a time to turn the lights out, to let their eyes close, and as best they could, to rest in peace. That's what taps means. It's like a powerful prayer. I'm going to invite Charlie to play taps for us now. Thank you, Charlie. That was beautiful. This weekend, many people across the United States take time to remember of the soldiers who have fallen in the service to their country. You may hear taps again this weekend. It's a tradition that at 3 o'clock on Memorial Day, which is tomorrow, musicians come out of their homes and they play taps. Maybe someone in your neighborhood will come out and play taps too. If they do, I encourage you to stop what you are doing, to take a moment to think of a soldier who may have been afraid, and let taps remind you that they're at peace. Thank you. I'm going to invite our friends to come to their seat class downstairs. And I'm going to ask the choir to sing us out.
As Kate said, today, or this weekend, is Memorial Day weekend, and we just wanted to take a quick moment to honor that and reflect upon it. Memorial Day is dedicated to honoring the U.S. military personnel who have died while serving in the United States Armed Forces. Over 1.3 million Americans have lost their lives in service to this country. Let us take a few moments today and throughout this weekend to think about and reflect on those service members, both known and unknown to us, who have lost their lives, as well as let's hold space for their family and friends who continue to grieve. Please join us now for hymn 336, All My Memories of Love. Please rise and embody your spirit.
Following the theme of the service, let's think about the many forms of loving. And by the way, did you know that aloha means with love? So aloha. You know, many years ago when I was courting my lovely wife, we went for a lot of bicycle rides and usually wound up in an ice cream place. At one especially popular place, we waited for half an hour, and when I got to the head of the line, they asked me what flavor I'd like. And I said, vanilla. She said, how can you order vanilla when there are 38 flavors? Well, but I said I love vanilla. Well, that's a pretty superficial kind of loving. But love and loving have many definitions. For example, we have sexual loving. This reflects feelings of arousal that are shared between people who are physically attracted to one another. Sexual loving is a gift for couples to express their love for one another, strengthen the bond between them, and be times to ensure the survival of the human race. However, a long-term relationship based solely on sexual loving is doomed to failure. The thrill of sexual loving wears off quickly unless there are other types of loving to go along with it. Like familial loving, the type of loving shown by a parent for a child or among family members. I'm sure that especially today we remember all those we have lost to the ages, but who still illuminate our memories. When my mother was terminal in a Chicago hospital and had decided that since she could not live without being on morphine in a bed with special humidified oxygen, she decided to pull the plug. She waited till we got there. As I was holding her hand and we talked, she said, out of the blue, "You know, your birth father really loved you. He used to carry you around." Now, I had not seen my alcoholic gambler birth father since I was 3, and had not thought much about him since. But my mother apparently thought I might have some very negative thoughts about him and wanted to lift that, quote, burden from me. As one of her last thoughts, my mother gave me a gift of love that I shall never forget. There is brotherly and sisterly loving, which speaks of the warm affection shared between friends or comrades in arms. We feel love for our friends and family in the sense of being kind and affectionate. A friend once told me he was so very fortunate to have 4 or 5 really close friends in his life. One desperately called him late one night and asked if he could have $1,000. My friend said, "Sure, but can it wait till morning?" No other questions were asked. Then there is self-sacrificing love, the loving that moves people to look out for the well-being of others they may not know personally. The essence of this loving is benevolence and commitment. Erotic and brotherly loving are not expressed to people who hate us and wish us ill. Self-sacrificing love can be. This type of love is expressed by those who go out into the world, sometimes at great personal cost, to fight the oppression of others, to defend their country, or to right economic and social injustice. When they are successful, we see joy in their wake. When they are not, they still have our love and respect, knowing that eventually they shall overcome. Let us pray that today we can each perform at least one act of loving kindness. There's an old Swedish saying, "Some of the fragrance remains on the hands that bestow bouquets." So, aloha, or to put it in the subjunctive, may we all live with love. And now for a moment of stillness.
Good morning. I'm Ted Barnes. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a lay minister at this congregation. This is the time of our service that we set aside to acknowledge the joys and sorrows that we all hold. As I light this first candle, I wish to acknowledge the sorrows that we hold. We are devastated by the killing of the teachers and children at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. We pray for an end to the senseless gun violence in the country. We mark the 2nd anniversary of the murder of George Floyd this week, and we are all heartbroken over the murder of 10 people at Tops Market in Buffalo, New York. As I light the second candle, I name the joys we hold. We are grateful for the children within our community and our lives who remind us that there is always hope and joy to be found in this world. We are thankful to have a community such as First Parish that is always there for us in our moments of grief and also in our moments of celebration. And we're thankful for the lovely weather we're having today. If you wish, please join us immediately after the service for the time of sharing of our joys and sorrows with one another in person and on Zoom.
Thank you, Ted. Like Ted said, I think this is actually, I've been so grateful to be a part of this wonderful community. You know, I have been thinking a lot about community spaces and congregations in particular, and missing my home congregation, but feeling like I have a place here, and I've just fallen in love with so much of you. And I appreciate that we have a space where we can bring, you know, when it's been a difficult week, we can come here and process it together and worship together. And so when you donate to First Parish, you are providing support for this wonderful community. So you can find online on your order of service, there are ways to donate, and then now our in person, our offering will be gratefully received. Thank you.
This is an excerpt from All About Love by Bell Hooks. Love is an action, a participatory emotion. Whether we engage in the process of self-love or loving others, we must move beyond the realm of feeling to actualize love. That is why it is useful to see love as a practice. When we meet, we need not feel inadequate or powerless, when we act. We can trust that there are concrete steps to take on love's path. We learn to communicate, to be still and listen to the needs of our hearts, and we learn to listen to others. We learn compassion by being willing to hear the pain as well as the joy of those we love. The path to love is not arduous or hidden, but we must choose to take the first step. If we do not know the way, there is always a loving spirit with an enlightened, open mind able to show us how to take the path that leads to the heart of love, the path that lets us return to love.
Thank you, Ted. Recently, my husband and I took our 6-year-old son to the American Heritage Museum, which is a military museum just outside of Hudson. They have military memorabilia from World War I to present. We thought that he would love seeing all the tanks and the big trucks, but instead he was terrified. He clung to his dad and asked to leave. I realized that we'd never actually told him about war. He didn't know about the Holocaust, and he'd never heard of September 11th. His life has been perfectly sheltered from so much of the terrors growing up in this world can bring. And I struggled with how to explain it all, especially as the reality of almost 100 years of human suffering was there just on display for him. He has not been totally sheltered, though. Because I believe that white parents should also bear the burden of teaching their children about racism, much like parents of color do, my son does know about racism, sexism, and homophobia. Though similar to war, he can't wrap his head around these concepts. He says, "What's that thing where people don't treat my friend the same?" He asks me why people would behave like this, and I never have a good answer. I imagine someday, likely soon, he will be asking me about the violence in our schools and our country's attachment to gun culture. And I will once again be at sea trying to figure out what to say. As you likely saw before this service, my intention for this week's sermon was to talk about bell hooks' views on love and its transformative place in our lives and in our communities. And I still will, but perhaps from a different lens than what I had originally planned. Because honestly, I spent most of this week numb by the tragedy in Texas and at a loss for what to say. Like many of you, I'm sure, I don't really have the words to speak to the horror of the last 2 weeks. Writer Clint Smith says, "I spent last week thinking about what it means to be Black in a country where people hunt you and hope to live stream your murder. I will now spend this week thinking about what it means to be a parent in a country where your child may not come home one day because a teenager was able to so easily buy a gun." Smith says that though he is a writer, language is failing him. He adds, "What vocabulary can describe the heartbeat of a parent pacing for hours outside of school, waiting to hear if their child survived? What words could ever be commensurate with the lost lives of so many little ones?" How do we find the words? How do we have anything to say? How do we give answers to the children in our lives, much less to ourselves? How do I watch as my son's T-Rex backpack disappears into the crowd of other backpacks covered with Pokemon or ballet dancers or unicorns, when I drop him off at his elementary school? And how can I ever feel safe? I'm not sure that I can. After September 11th, Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers, briefly came out of retirement to speak to the children and parents of the world and to reassure them. But even Mr. Rogers had no idea what to say. He purportedly responded to his producer, "I just don't know what good this is gonna do." He ultimately recorded 4 videos that aired on the 1-year anniversary of the attacks. And in one, he reminded people that we are all called to be tikkun olam, a concept our own Reverend Dr. Stephanie May recently spoke about, which is repairers of creation. Whenever there is a major tragedy, many people make reference to Mr. Rogers' famous advice to children. He said, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." But this advice was for children, not for adults. While it can be of great comfort for children to look to the helpers so that they can see the world is still made up of people who will care for them and keep them safe, adults are called to something more. We are called to be the helpers, to look in the face of great tragedy and find the space to love people through the hurt, to let the lives we lead be a reflection of our internal values and act from an ethic of love. In her book, All About Love, author Bell Hooks, who passed away in December of 2021, talks about living with this ethic of love. She stresses the importance of understanding love, not just as a feeling we have, but as a call to action. That idea of being repairers of creation. But we are repairing not only the world, but ourselves. It is through this ethic of love that we will find healing. Hooks tells us that love in action is always about service, and that being of service to others is a therapeutic practice as fruitful as any other. She adds to begin by always thinking of love as an action rather than a feeling is one way in which anyone using the word in this manner automatically assumes accountability and responsibility. We are often taught we have no control over our feelings, yet most of us accept that we choose our actions, that intention and will inform what we do. When faced with moments such as these, when it is all we can do to process the senseless and terrible killing in Buffalo before we are then bombarded by the tragedy in Uvalde, it is difficult to find the hope, to understand where the love could be, or how we can make sense of a world that contains such heartbreak, a country that allows such loss time and again. In these moments, perhaps a turn to action, a recognition of our role as helpers can be the guiding light for many of us. Bell Hooks quotes John Wellwood from Journey of the Heart, Up the Path of Conscious Love, who says, dreaming, I'm gonna wait for them to pass. Okay. He says, dreaming that love will save us, solve all our problems, or provide a steady state of bliss or security only keeps us stuck in wishful fantasy, undermining the real power of the love, which is to transform us. They both recognize that to act from a place of love can be transformational for ourselves and those around us. It was not until I got involved in the work of community organizing that I think I became my best self. For a long time, I struggled with being overly judgmental and often caused more drama in my friend group than was probably necessary. I look back on my younger self and I cringe. I can't be the only one, right? But when I turned my focus to how I was showing up in the world and how I could work to make even the smallest corner of my world a little brighter, I changed. In her book, All About Love, Bell Hooks looks to the works of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Thomas Merton, and Erich Fromm, and says that they always emphasize love as an active force that should lead us into greater communion with the world. That we should not be looking to simply give an individual life satisfaction, but through the practice of love, this is the primary way we end domination and oppression. She's saying that love is political. Hooks challenges us that much of the discussions about spirituality and love become too focused on our individual self-improvement and not enough on the practice of love within the context of community and our responsibilities to it. In the book Radical Dharma, the Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams speaks to this idea that sometimes our spiritual paths in the Western world can get bogged down by focusing on the internal work of me, without also realizing that there is a community piece as well. She stresses that internal liberation goes hand in hand with external liberation. In her book, Bell Hooks quotes Parker J. Palmer, who says, "To be fully alive is to act. Action is the visible form of an invisible spirit, an outward manifestation of an inward power. But as we act, we not only express what is in us and help give shape to the world, we also receive what is outside us and reshape our inner selves." Hooks further challenges us by saying our commitment to a spiritual life calls us to do more than read a book or go on a retreat. But it requires a conscious practice, a willingness to unite the way we think with the way we act. She tells a story of when she was talking to a university audience, and she told them that she had faith in the power of white people to speak out against racism, challenging and changing prejudice. She told them she believes that we can all change our minds and our actions. She believed this not because of some conviction of a utopian ideal, but because of the stories of many of the people throughout history who, as she says, offered their lives in the service of justice and freedom. She got pushback on her assertions from the audience, who said the people she was talking about were just exceptions. They weren't the rule. And she agreed. But Hooks also said that we need to change our thinking so that we can see ourselves as being the one who changes rather than like those who refuse to change. She says that what was exceptional about these people was not that they were smarter or kinder than their neighbors, but that they were willing to live the truth of their values. When we live our lives with a focus on fierce love and action that we can share with our families, our friends, and our communities, we de-center ourselves and our hang-ups and fears, and we inch ever closer to the beloved community that Dr. King spoke about so many decades ago. Hooks says, when we choose to love, we choose to move against fear, against alienation and separation. We choose to love. The choice to love is a choice to connect, to find ourselves in the other. But this notion of living in love rather than fear is a difficult one. Personally, I'm living with a lot of fear right now. I think many of us are. Certainly many of people of color, trans people, and other members of our communities living with marginalized identities are living with a fear that I couldn't possibly understand. However, for many parents, grandparents, and other caregivers of children, we live with a constant fear that was not present when many of us were young. Sending the children we love to school, the most basic thing a child can do, something that happens every day, has become fraught for millions of Americans. I don't know how to resolve that. All I can do is try every day to externalize my internal values, to make sure the way I show up in the world is a reflection of who I want to be, to recognize my fear and to act anyway, as well as to work to try to end this American culture of the gun. I will give my final words today to Bell Hooks, who can hopefully give us a little bit of hope in the face of so much tragedy. She says, "Love redeems. Despite all the lovelessness that surrounds us, the understanding that love redeems appears to be a resilient aspect of our heart's knowledge. The healing power of redemptive love lures us and calls us toward the possibility of healing. We are all mysteriously called to love, no matter the conditions of our lives, the degree of our depravity or despair. The persistence of this call gives us reason to hope. Without hope, we cannot return to love. Breaking our sense of isolation and opening up with the window of opportunity, hope provides us with a reason to go forward. It is a practice of positive thinking. Being positive, living in a permanent state of hopefulness, renews the spirit, renewing our faith and love's promise. Hope is our covenant. Blessed be. Our next hymn today is number 1046, Shall We Gather at the River. This is actually one of my absolute favorite hymns. I sing it every year in choir at the high school graduation when I was in high school, and it has always stuck with me. I just love this idea of wherever we end up in this life, just we all gather at the river. So thank you. Please rise on body or spirit.
With
Our closing words today are a poem called Small Kindnesses by Danusha Lemeray. I apologize if I mispronounced that. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by. Or how strangers will still say, "Bless you," when someone sneezes. A leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of hot coffee and to say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them and for them to smile back, for the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other now, so far from tribe and fire. Only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy? These fleeting temples we make together when we say, "Here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first. I like your hat." This week, let's try to notice those small kindnesses. Just hang on to them and remember that this is where the holy lies. Amen.